After getting off work, she took the elevator down from her workplace on the 38th floor and pressed the button for the parking garage. Soon after, a burly worker named Ben entered the elevator on the 22nd floor and confirmed that he was also going to the parking garage. During the ride, Ellen could hear Ben's slightly heavy breathing, which made her feel increasingly uneasy. Watching the floor numbers go down, she hoped they would reach the parking garage as soon as possible so she could get away from this man. Just then, the elevator bell rang, and the anxiety hanging in Ellen's heart finally eased a little. The elevator stopped on the 4th floor, but when the doors opened, no one came in for a long time. An impatient Ben pressed the door close button. However, just as the doors were closing, another man outside shouted that he wanted to get in. Ellen pressed the door open button. The building's security guard, Hank, rushed in hurriedly. He immediately began swiping his security card repeatedly against the elevator panel. After the card was recognized, the light for the parking garage button went out, and then he pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator began traveling upward from the 4th floor to the 44th. As Ben and Ellen stood there in confusion, Hank suddenly turned around. They saw a large patch of blood on his shirt. The two were stunned. Looking at the blood on his own body, Hank himself had not yet recovered from the shock. It turned out that Hank claimed that something resembling an alien or a pumpkin-headed monster was hunting people inside the building. It had almost caught him just moments ago, and the blood on him was not his own. Ellen wanted to leave immediately, but Hank said they couldn't. They had to go to the top floor. While the elevator was moving upward, nothing could be allowed to enter, and the top hatch had to remain closed. Doing so, he said, could save everyone's lives. Stubborn Ben naturally did not believe any of this. He began pressing the elevator buttons, but there was no response. Hank had already manually locked the elevator using his security card. Now everyone could only go to the 44th floor. An angry Ben tried to grab the security card, and Hank immediately pulled out a knife to protect himself. Taking advantage of Hank's momentary distraction, Ben seized the knife and subdued him. Meanwhile, Ellen tried to use the emergency phone inside the elevator to call for help, but there was no response, because the person responsible for answering that phone was Hank himself. Ben demanded that Hank take them back down to the parking garage. At that moment, the elevator suddenly began to shake and lost power. Hank shouted that the monsters had cut off the electricity. Although Ben was tall and powerfully built, he actually suffered from claustrophobia. He suddenly squatted down and said he could barely breathe. Before long, the emergency lights in the elevator came on. Ellen then noticed that her clothes were also covered in blood. At this point, swiping the security card again had no effect. The system had already been disabled. Ben couldn't wait any longer. He stood up and used Hank's knife to pry open the elevator control panel, attempting to fix it. Hank believed this would only backfire and damage the circuitry, so he immediately stopped him. Emotionally unstable, Ben then tried to open the elevator's top hatch to escape, but as soon as Ben opened a small gap, they could hear waves of hissing roars. Sensing danger, Hank quickly grabbed Ben and pulled him down, insisting that if the hatch were opened, they would all be killed by the monsters. Ben refused to listen and stubbornly tried to force the hatch open. Ellen called for help upward. At that moment, the elevator shook again, and Ben fell to the floor. When he woke up, the elevator had returned to normal. Taking advantage of Hank's inattention, Ben got up and tried to snatch his security card. During the struggle, the card fell to the ground and was quickly grabbed by Ellen. She swiped the card, activating the elevator, and lit up the P4 parking garage button. At that time, the elevator was descending from the 40th floor. However, Ben pulled Ellen aside and hurriedly pressed the button for the 39th floor, wanting to get out immediately. Hank stopped him, saying he couldn't leave or everyone would be killed. Then the elevator doors opened. Outside, it was very quiet. There were no monsters as Hank had described. Ben believed it was safe and quickly stepped out to get some air. He even invited Ellen to leave with him via the stairwell. Ellen looked outside and saw no monsters, so she initially agreed to go. Seeing that his repeated warnings were useless, Hank stopped trying to persuade them and told Ellen to just hurry up and leave.